is really considered to be really one of the more contemporary saints, maybe the first of the contemporary saints, living in Italy in the latter part of the 1800s. He's the first saint to really submit to an interview by the media, and then he himself published a bulletin for the Salesian Foundation that he founded, the Salesian Order, a bulletin that is still in print even today in 50 different languages. So he's the founder of the Salesian community. A little bit about his very interesting life. John Bosco was born in 1815 in the hillside hamlet of Becci, Italy. He was the youngest son of Francesco and Margherita. He had two older brothers, Antonio and Giuseppe. The Boscos were farm hands, and he was born into a time of great shortage and famine in the countryside, following the devastation wrought by the Napoleonic Wars and a drought in 1817. When he was a little more than 2 years old, his father Francesco died, leaving the support of three boys to his mother, Margherita. She played a strong role in Bosco's formation and personality, and was an early supporter of her son's vocation. In 1825, when he was 9, Bosco had the first of a series of dreams, which would play an influential role in his outlook and work. The first dream left a profound impression on him for the rest of his life, according to his memoirs. Bosco apparently saw a multitude of very poor boys who were crude and ill-mannered, fighting outside. Then a man appeared who was nobly attired and said to Bosco, "You will have to win over these young boys not with blows, but with gentleness and kindness. So begin right now to show them that sin is ugly and virtue is beautiful." When the traveling entertainers performed at a local feast in the nearby countryside, John watched and studied the jugglers' tricks and acrobatic secrets. Then he would put on his own shows for other children in the countryside. Before and after, he would teach them various prayers. He also spent time working as a shepherd and began receiving his first instruction from the local parish priest. His childhood experiences are thought to have inspired him to become a priest. And at the time, being a priest was generally seen as a profession for the privileged rather than farmers. On a cold morning of February 1827, John left his home and went to look for work as a farm servant. Having to face life by himself at a relatively young age may have developed his later sympathies to help abandoned boys. After begging unsuccessfully for work, he ended up doing various menial tasks. In 1835, Bosco entered the seminary, and in 1841, after 6 years of study, he was ordained a priest. His first appointment was to be a chaplain of a girls' boarding school in Turin, Italy. His other ministries including visiting prisoners, teaching catechism, and helping out at many country parishes. At the time, the city of Turin had a population over 100,000 inhabitants. It reflected the effects of industrialization and urbanization. Numerous poor families lived in the slums of the city, having come from the countryside in search of a better life. In visiting the prisons, John Bosco was disturbed to see so many boys from ages 12 to 18. He was determined to find a means to prevent them ending up there. Because of population growth and migration to the city, Bosco found the traditional methods of parish ministry inefficient. He decided it was necessary to try another form of apostolate, and he began to meet the boys where they worked and gathered in shops and marketplaces. They were pavers, stonecutters, masons, plasterers, who came from faraway places. He established an oratory, which was not simply a charitable institution, and his activities were not limited to Sundays. For John Bosco, it became his permanent occupation. He looked for jobs for the unemployed. Some of the boys did not have sleeping quarters and slept under bridges or in bleak public dormitories. Twice he tried to provide lodgings in his house. The first time they stole the blankets and other items. In May of 1847, he gave shelter to a young boy from Valencia in one of the 3 rooms he was renting in the slums where he was living with his mother. He and his mother Margarita began taking in orphans and lodging them in various places. In the space of 9 years, he and his mother provided shelter for nearly 800 young boys. Bosco and his oratory moved around from town to town for a number of years, but he was turned out of several places. After only 2 months based in the Church of St. Martin, the entire neighborhood expressed its annoyance with the noise coming from the boys at play. A formal complaint was lodged against them with the municipality. Rumors also circulated that the meetings conducted by Bosco with his boys were dangerous. Their recreation could be turned into a revolution against the government, and the group was evicted on many occasions. Opposition to Bosco and his work came from various quarters. Traditionalist clergy accused him of stealing the young and old away from their own parishes. Nationalist politicians saw his several hundred young men as a recruiting ground for revolution. The chief of police in Turin regarded the open-air catechisms as overtly political and a threat to the state. Bosco was interrogated on several occasions, but no charges were ever made. Several attempts were also made on his life, including a near stabbing and a shooting. Some of the more mature young men eventually decided to join John Bosco, and this was the origin of the Salesian congregation. Eventually, a seminary was established and formed into the Society of St. Francis de Sales. This was the nucleus of the Salesians, the religious order that would carry on Bosco's work. He also worked with a small group of girls and ended up establishing a group of religious sisters to do for girls what the Salesians were doing for boys. They were called the Daughters of Mary, Health of Christians. Bosco, tired and worn out from his many duties, died on January 31st, 1888. His funeral was attended by thousands of people. Soon after, there was popular demand to have him canonized. The Archdiocese of Turin investigated, and witnesses were called to determine if he was worthy to be declared a saint. Even though several high-ranking clergy considered him to be a loose cannon, he was eventually beatified in 1929 and canonized in 1934. He was given the title Father and Teacher of Youth. The name of Don Bosco is still associated with various schools run by the Salesian Order, which is the second largest religious order in the world.